If you want to add a little character to your space, perhaps try angels. We're looking at Michael down here in the bottom right. He does appear on my YouTube channel in the Entity Channeling playlist, in his very own video where you can watch me draw part of him while I'm recording. You can also get Michael as a print here in my DeviantArt print shop, right here, and then click if you want to buy a print. There's different shapes and sizes and materials available. You can still get the original in my Etsy shop. He's down in the flat drawing section. And here he is right here. And there's the original drawing. It's gel pen on printer cardstock. And all of these places to visit and purchase variations of Michael can be found through my link tree. Thanks for watching, and the video you came here for starts now. Welcome to Cat the Minion YouTube channel. My name is Teresa, but you can call me Cat. This is Shatter episode 3. My guest today is my brother Sam Vanivray. Sam is a filmmaker. All right, hello. We're talking to my brother Sam Vanivray, who's a filmmaker. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Okay, so before I ask you the 3 questions, I'm going to screen share like I know what the hell I'm doing. Okay. So we're looking at your link tree. So you have your IMDb page, Acting Reel, YouTube, Imaginary Danger Productions, and Letterboxd is where you do your movie reviews, right? When you critique other films.
Yep, that's right. So it's not to be taken seriously though. It's
right.
Mostly just funny little things.
I was just remembering what that was for myself. So this is another link that you gave me, which is part of the Imaginary Danger thing, which is the blog posts. Right. And I'm gonna try to. That's the little short film. I noticed that a lot of these look like horror
mostly
films,
horror, a couple sci-fi.
But I thought it was kind of funny doing horror / sci-fi way back since Attack of the Lizard People.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't even know if it still exists anywhere.
I think that was just because we had that mask. And we just couldn't. It was the easiest thing to think of. But I started trying to get into horror a few years ago to sort of understand what audiences actually want from horror movies.
Oh, okay. I thought
sort of how they're built and stuff, so that I could actually eventually actually write horror scripts myself.
I thought maybe you were just getting into it because like a lot of horror is low budget and it was easier to get into, but I like that you
well, there's also that factor. That's also part of it.
That was what I told myself. So I also just grabbed a couple pictures of the artwork that I have that you made that's in my room. So I have this photo that you had, this metal photo from that photo website that you had stuff on, and this framed print that you made. I'm not sure what it is. I just called it like a robot lozenge. And I've got, these are older. I've got both of these in the same corner.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are old.
And I've got this asshole on my monitor still.
Oh, yeah. Flying bear.
For the last like 15 years. And then also Brute Sanity DVD. Didn't you tell me you found it on Peacock recently?
Yeah, it's streaming on Peacock.
Yeah, I thought that was neat. And then this is just the Spike concept drawing, where I thought it was going to be. There it is. That's the Spike concept drawing that I need for that. I just figured a little cross promote there. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to ask you the questions. Before I ask you the...
Yeah. Actually, speaking of creativity, the reason in the movie I couldn't make the spikes pure metal because I didn't know how to do it in the 3D graphics software, and it took so long just to do it with cones that I was just like, you know what, it's gonna be cones now.
I know, it would have been.
That was kind of forced creativity there.
Yeah, when you have to make with what you've got That's why all of my stuff is like slightly crappy. I'm like, well, it's like, first of all, like, I either don't know how to do it, I can't afford to do it, or I want to make sure people know that I'm not like a mass corporation and that they should appreciate what I'm trying to do. you know?
That's okay.
Did you have anything else you want to talk about or say before I ask the questions?
Nope.
Okay, so the first question, I always think of Monty Python when I say the three questions. It's like burning in my head. So in your opinion, what is creativity and where does it come from? Obviously, you've probably studied
So actually I
robotics.
sort of come up with my own sort of definition of creativity that has two parts.
Mhm,
That's informed from my research in artificial intelligence.
right.
So as like an introduction though,
Mhm,
um, I'll say a few minutes about AI as a sort of segue into my. Actually, I'll do a quote first.
okay. Yeah, I assumed you were going to get into robotics because I was going to ask if you could program a robot to like draw pictures and stuff.
So I'm going to do a quote by Marvin Minsky uh, from this book called Society of Mind,
Mhm,
which is a weird, funny, like large format book that's actually an artificial intelligence book.
mhm,
But it's full, but it almost looks like a children's book. It's full of pictures and drawings,
mhm.
and each page is its own chapter.
Oh, neat.
Um, and even though it's well known in the AI community, almost nobody actually has implemented anything from this because it's actually more like how minds work as informed by psychology, mostly child psychology, going all the way back to Piaget, which I guess was more in the 60s. And then this Marvin Minsky guy who co-founded the original AI project in I guess the 50s. He was one of the actual co-founders of that, and I met him
Oh, neat.
before he died, and actually took a class with him.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, even after all those decades, this book came out early 80s, and even after all that time, it's pretty much like no one. It's just too hard for one thing to implement,
Mhm,
and it requires like it's all about agents in your mind, sort of, is
mhm,
the overall theory. In other words, trying to explain psychology as a bunch of demons, little demons, some people call them, or agents
mhm.
in your mind, and they all do different things and they're hooked up in different ways. But it's kind of hard to do that because you have to make like what's called a cognitive architecture,
Mhm.
and that's very hard to do.
I think
Uh,
I think
and also there's not much funding. There's never been much funding for that either. And AI researchers kind of cluster around where the money is. So
yeah.
right now for the past, I don't know, 15 years, as you probably know, deep learning and now transformers, which are just another deep learning type of thing, have been the whole big thing that the whole like just totally taken over machine learning, and machine learning has totally taken over the AI world. So there's only like a few weirdos here and there who still are interested in these decades old problems and questions on how to make a human level AI. So the quotation I wanted to read from this is actually not from Minsky. It's him quoting Douglas Hofstadter, who, of course, as I'm sure everyone knows, is the author of this book, which is famous in intellectual circles, especially in the circles where everyone says they've read this book and nobody has actually finished it. I have finished it. It's a sort of an AI book, sort of a how the mind works book as well, but also related to a whole bunch of other subjects. Hofstadter thinks the brain requires strange loops, or not the brain necessarily, but the mind to be a human type mind requires a sort of paradoxical, strange loops. So that's something to think about. I don't know how that relates to creativity. Um, but the quote is making variations on a theme is the crux of creativity. It
Mhm,
is not some magical, mysterious process that occurs when two indivisible concepts collide. It is a consequence of the divisibility of concepts into already significant sub-conceptual elements. And Minsky's explanation of that, these agents in the mind or structures or whatever, this is sort of creativity, like inside your mind, not necessarily creating some output. Uh, that it would be if you're randomly smashing these agents together to create new ideas or whatever, or new structures, that's not as useful as taking pieces from already existing agents or structures that are already working and that represent something, or they're doing something. So it's more useful to create by taking little pieces from those existing ones as opposed to just randomly creating a whole bunch of new stuff that'll end up being useless. So it's more efficient. So there's that.
So what you're talking about is like in terms of what they're doing with intelligence now is more like yanking bricks off of a pyramid to build another building than it is smashing atoms in the CERN collider.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't think what they're doing now is even useful at all. I don't think they've really figured it out yet at all, because it's all just it's deep learning and whatnot. It's all just complicated neural nets. So they're not even doing anything with. There's not enough architecture, in my opinion.
There's not any.
It's all just trying to force everything into a few technical concepts, which of course engineers and scientists, they love that, because they don't want to, they're very narrow, not very diverse in terms of like thinking. And colleges encourage them to be very focused, and so does jobs and getting funding and stuff. So people, they just want something that's a name that's popular that they can use in and that's the hammer now.
I was gonna make an
every problem's a nail. And
I was gonna make an analogy using a nail. I'm saying they keep trying to make better nails instead of devising a screw.
And every once in a while I see a new thing. Oh, this this neural net or deep learning based thing. Look, it's creating. I mean, the popular ones this year have been like the pseudo painters, DALL-E, and Crayon, which generate images.
Oh yeah, the ones on the.
But of course, those are based on your input. So the only creativity is just like the accidental surprise when it does something really weird. But there's been a lot of research projects where people are like, look, it's because of deep learning or because of neural nets, I've been able to have this thing generate, paintings or generate text or generate color schemes or whatever. But what's funny to me is you don't need neural nets for any of that. I mean, I wrote code when I was still learning to program using like BASIC at first back in high school. I was able to make a lot of programs that were creative and generated little faces and poems and
like the expletive generator there.
Prose, and I was trying to automate, even like help automate creating little video games and stuff. And so I guess that just leads up to my part one of what creativity is the randomization part. So I think that is the first part. You have to have some way of getting things together, even if it's not full random, if it's like using some algorithm, like the aforementioned, like useful pieces putting together. But whatever the case, randomness is the basic thing you can do, and it works in a computer program, which of course is really good. Really easy, because you can just have a database of a whole bunch of stuff, and the more and more stuff you let it choose from, then it feels like, whoa, it's coming out of left field with all this stuff I wouldn't have been able to think of, because your mind is so structured, especially as an adult, that it's hard to randomize concepts. You can certainly get into that like mode, I guess. You're sort of brainstorming in your brain, or do real brainstorming, like on a team where you sort of do a synthesis and then a culling afterwards of the synthesis to find the good things that came out of it. But yeah, I think part one is just randomness. That's all you need. And part two, my definition is common sense. And I'm using that in the AI form of that, the AI definition of common sense, which is the basic stuff that humans have, which they learn, which they develop as they grow. And you can there's actually very specific stages of that in children. I think there's 4 or 5 of the original Piaget stages, and some other scientists have like made even later, like going up all the way up to like, you know, people's adulthood, of saying these are sort of a little bit more vaguely, but in more rough, that these are additional mental stages that people typically go through. But the baby child stages are things like learning sort of folk physics, or basic how reality works for humans, at least.
The like
You know, like
clock.
if you drop a ball, it's going to fall on the ground. If you pour liquid into a cup, it's going to go into the cup. If you hide the cup behind a box, the cup is still in existence. It didn't magically disappear. But a baby at first doesn't really know that.
Right.
Baby, you know, something disappears, like, whoa, where'd it go? It's gone. It's just gone from existence.
Right. You see that in animals too.
Right. Yeah.
Where it's like, I mean, in my head, commonly children and cats are very similar.
Yeah. Actually, that used to be one of those video things of like, drop the blanket, but the person runs.
Oh yeah,
runs away, and then some animals are like, what the hell?
Yeah. TikTok.
Although some of them just are like I don't know if it's dogs with smaller brains or something, and they're just like, I'll just lie down on the blanket.
Yeah, I don't remember if I've read that many psychology books. I know I read The Absorbent Mind by Maria Montessori, and I feel like I read some other stuff. Some of the stuff I read is more like the woo kind of stuff. Like
the woo woo.
Yeah, like Psycho Cybernetics and the sequel and some stuff. But I also read this book about it was about controlling or managing or learning to be able to manage negative emotions. It was this huge, well, I don't know how huge it was, but it was a bunch of people that got together with the Dalai Lama in like the year 2000, and this guy that wrote the book was in charge of taking down the notes from the meeting. And
right.
through these,
yes, I saw that book.
Yeah.
Actually, I may have given that to you.
Maybe. It was really boring. It took me a long time to do it, but it was worth it. Because I mean, the basic idea is that your brain can like physically control your body in order to like mediate negative emotional states, so that you're not like, you know, punching walls and shit. And but I feel like that's sort of leaning towards psychological, but I haven't read that much. Like, I feel like most of the psychological stuff I read was probably like 20 years ago. So I don't remember in particular other stuff that I might have read. Because a lot of the stuff that was like sciencey that I've read has been more like astrophysics kind of a theme. Because I was thinking one of the things we're talking about with the way the brain things work, the little packets or whatever, think of those like Calabi-Yau manifolds.
I don't know what that is.
It's like a Mobius strip, and then it's like four of them attached together, so it's this weird little shape that's like going in all different directions, like four donuts attached to each other.
Is that used to model something?
It's it was supposed to be like a possible shape of small dimensions that we can't see.
Oh, okay, cool.
But it was
like the common sense reasoning thing is it's creativity, at least human-like creativity, is because that's the one thing that's one of the very big things that's been missing in AI, and is still missing, even though people like Marvin Minsky, who I mentioned before with the Big Yellow Book, they've been saying that up until he died for many decades, but it was really hard to get anyone to, and that's another hard problem people have tried to work on, common sense in machines, and it's a really hard thing to do, and then people graduate, and then their stuff is lost, and then someone else restarts, and then they never get very far, etc. And again, not much money into that unless you can somehow connect it to deep learning.
I was going to ask you if common sense is more like survival, or if it's more like societal structure, or if it's both.
Some people would, I think some scientists would say it's definitely partly strictly for survival, because if it was anti-survival, then we would have it wouldn't have evolved that way.
Mhm.
Uh, and there's one scientist, Douglas Hoffman, who has gone a few steps ahead of that, saying, like, from a philosophical point of view, because it's by evolution, it hasn't actually selected for veridical reality. In other words, what we perceive is almost certainly not really what reality is like.
Oh
And
yeah.
he's done some mathematical experiments that sort of support that.
Well, that feeds into that whole like holographic thing, and we're just a simulation too. Like our reality perceived isn't what's really there,
Right.
especially in terms of time.
Yeah, in terms of everything. So, uh, so
I wonder too, like if common sense is just like epigenetic traits. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be learned. It comes like preloaded on your hard drive when you're born.
yeah, I think everything is a combination of that. That's the old nature versus nurture
Yeah.
arguments. And I've never been particularly, I'm not a scientist. I don't really care which is which. I'm just like, okay, it's in the realm of development, which could be preloaded, or it could be a program that's preloaded, which then unfold, which is kind of like what epigenetics is.
I
It's
mean, it's
the
like
unfolding, it's a pre-planned unfolding, and then combined with learning, and then bada bing, you got a human.
yeah, it's like when you're born, it's like getting plugged in, basically, right? You got to turn it on for it to work.
Right, and then it's like an insanely complex origami folding itself up.
Oh yeah, that's kind of like what those Calabi-Yau manifolds look like.
Yeah, so anyway, without common sense, your random stuff is just a bunch of random, like my random poem generator.
Mhm.
I added some little structure to it, like to make it rhyme, but then to actually get the interesting poems is just back to me as a human selecting them. And that's based on my common sense knowledge of, oh, what's funny, or what's an actual interesting, like, contrast or metaphor or whatever, because otherwise it's a soup of random words that are random. Even if it's grammatical sentences, it's still just a bunch of random uh stuff. So anything that's creative, a painter as well, it could paint random stuff or
I've seen
combine random photos together, but it then comes back to us as the humans to be the selector, which of, oh, that's actually, that's an interesting metaphor, that's an interesting contrast, or there's some meaning in that. And so AI can't do that. And even these current, like GPT-3 or whatever, these ultra massive text generators that are based on deep learning and use like the entire power of the sun to to run, right? We're using insane amounts of power on these things. Those just, they have an statistical accumulations, and that's what it spits out, just tons and tons of statistics. But I would argue it still has no meaning. There's no grounding of anything. And so I would say they may generate text that sort of seems like it has some common sense, but I don't consider it anywhere near close to solving that problem. So I guess for humans that's good. We're still in the creativity business.
Yeah, I've seen those. I forgot that there was a compute like AI generated text, like those comedic obituaries and like little script pages that are ridiculous. They end up being like real funny because they don't make sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, most of those are just jokes made by humans, though.
Yeah,
But
I find too like
sometimes it is pretty bad what comes out of an AI.
when I write poetry, it annoys me and makes me feel like it's cheesy if I make it rhyme. So I have these like weird. Sometimes I prefer like alliterative stuff more than I do rhyming. But I also haven't really written any poems in like 10 years, so it doesn't really matter at this point.
It would be really hard for an AI, even the ones now, to make like an entire book of poetry that is as good as like the bestsellers on Amazon, right? Like what's that book, Milk or something? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to.
and those are the things that it's not formal structures, it's not rhyming, it's stuff that resonates with us, and it would be very hard to to generate that automatically.
Have to program it to emote first, which is way more than programming it to be creative, I think.
Right.
Are you
Okay.
are you ready for the second question?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you trying to express or accomplish with your art form? That could, or art forms, plural.
Well, with film, I guess it's a combination of trying to make a piece of entertainment that I think is something I would like to watch, and but also be have an audience that's larger than the set of just me. Because I can appreciate some really weird movies, but they'd be they're boring to everybody else.
Uh-huh.
But so movies that are entertaining to a large group, and in terms of themes, I do like to have themes, but I've realized I don't necessarily want that to be I don't want that to distract from just having fun.
Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to get better at making the themes better, and try and make them tie into the internal conflict of the protagonists, which is like the standard way to write screenplays. You have a 3-act plot with protagonist or protagonists,
Mhm.
and at least one of them has a pretty big internal conflict, and then there's an external conflict.
Mhm.
And that's how the standard screenplay sort of system is. So I like totally, I do appreciate just the weirdo script that's like screw that structure, and sometimes those movies get made, but oftentimes they don't.
Yeah, just
But I felt like at this part of my life, I want to try and play by the rules of script structure for the most part before thinking I'm good enough to break the rules.
yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I'm not trying to. I had a conversation recently with a director of theater, and she was saying at first she had grand notions of trying to change people with these plays, really get people to think about their lives and what they're doing and their philosophies. And then she eventually just gave up with that and feels like they're not really making an impact, but she still tries to have some real life thing at the end, I guess, to try and make people think about some real life, some issue or something. But I think for me, I definitely am not trying to, at this point, not trying to have like themes that necessarily make people like want to like reconsider their whole lives and
Right.
change. I'm not trying to make some big political statements or anything like that. And the other thing is like there is a personal thing, which is not necessarily themes, but like sort of projects
Mhm.
for myself. But I've realized I can't necessarily pitch that to people.
Mhm.
Uh, but at least they'll be there for me privately and for the occasional critic or whatever who actually knows the history of film, and it's like, aha, you're doing, like, for instance, I have a movie that I want to make that is basically a neo-noir,
Mhm.
I would say a feminist neo-noir, but I can't like pitch that to anybody if I'm trying to get people on board. It's just more like a thing for film people and academics or whatever to appreciate if they want to.
I mean,
All the main viewers and people who might fund that, or people that you'd pitch to, they want to even hear the word noir. They uh, they just want to know, what is the story, who is the character, why do I care? You know what I mean?
I'd watch a noir. I kind of enjoyed watching some, like, way back in film critique,
Mhm.
and of course Saturday Night Fever, which is a huge noir to me, in my opinion. 'Cause everyone's such an asshole in that movie.
Right. Yeah, I would say actually, the movie Showgirls, I would say, is actually a neo-noir, but because it's like Barbie pastel colors in uh Las sunny Las Vegas
Mhm.
and got a bad rap when it came out. I think that kind of went over people's heads. But that's my opinion, is that it's actually a noir,
Probably. I haven't actually seen it.
just disguised as a gaudy weirdo
Yeah.
movie.
It's like songs that have really dark lyrics dressed up as something bouncy.
Right. And I don't know why people are so surprised, because Paul Verhoeven, the director, I forgot which country he's from, somewhere somewhere in Europe. He might be Denmark. I don't know. He's from somewhere over there. But
But
they let him into Hollywood in the 80s, and that's like every movie he did was subversive, but disguised. Like he did RoboCop, the first RoboCop.
he's Dutch.
And if you see the real version, not like the edit, a watered down TV version, it's not only extremely gory and brutal, it's brutal against the entire military, uh, capitalist and police complex,
Mhm.
and sort of satirical about a lot of other things, the media, police, etc.
I actually watched.
But the the culture in the aid, the culture around that is like, oh, cool, it's a robot, it's a cyborg cop,
Mhm.
yay.
Yeah,
He gets to blow stuff up.
yeah, they're not super
There's
picky.
toys, yay, it's got toys.
It's not. They're not too picky about their action sequences in those '80s movies.
No, well, I wouldn't say that. I think they are picky. But
There's
yeah,
more.
anyway, that director is, and eventually they just kicked him out of I guess they got sick of it. He did Starship Troopers,
Oh, that was pretty good.
which was also fooled a lot of people into thinking it was straightforward, when really it was about Nazis as the heroes.
Uh-huh.
But most people were like, "Oh, cool! Let's fight some aliens."
Uh-huh.
But it's a lot. I wouldn't say deeper, but it was basically a satire.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess after Showgirls, and he did one last movie, like maybe Hollow Man, and then I guess they kicked him out, and he's went back to Europe and made more. He still makes movies.
Uh-huh.
Benedetta is most recent, I believe.
I don't know if I've heard of that, but I've missed a lot of movies in the last 20 years, so I'm not a very good litmus test for stuff. So, have you encountered what could be considered the paranormal, and do you think this has a link to creativity? And that includes psychedelics, whether that's music or drugs or sound or smells or whatever.
No.
Oh, I'm glad we made another section for that.
Mic drop and bye. I have not experienced paranormal.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think that, in terms of psychedelics, I guess whatever puts you in the mood
Mhm.
for creativity is fine. But if you're talking about like having a full-on like Aldous Huxley trip,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of debatable whether that's creative beyond just, I mean, kind of like dreams.
I think
I have some really wacky, vivid dreams, but it's very rare that any of that's useful ideas for film scripts. Most of my good ideas just come when I'm just like walking around, or just
uh-huh.
reading something or seeing some other movie, and I come up with an idea, or if I just sit down and specifically am trying to come up with ideas and get into the flow of it. Um, so yeah, I guess that's something that people probably argue against me, but it's just my opinion.
I found um, when I read the electric Kool-Aid acid test that it gave me a headache for the first couple chapters of the book because it's written in the point of view of somebody who's high, and it gave me a headache because that's how my brain operates normally.
Hmm,
And I was like, when I want read a book, I want to escape from like the constant like you know.
I see.
So I'm wondering if
I mean, I read that book. I didn't have that experience.
I was wondering too, like when I been asking people about psychedelics if there's something about like neurodivergence that would lead towards greater creativity, like people with synesthesia.
I mean that gets back to like associating things that aren't commonly associated with, so it certainly could help
Uh-huh.
creativity or other types of just I don't know, styles
Uh-huh.
maybe of creativity. I was gonna say something, forgot what it was.
Mhm.
Talking about spacing a attention deficit. Oh, but I guess also in terms of just drugs, if we live in a sort of I don't know, I guess the model of psychiatry and mental some parts of mental health. I guess the model that we're going with the past couple decades is that neurochemical things in your brain, such as imbalances of serotonin, cause you to have moods or feelings or behaviors. And, that's why they prescribe drugs,
Uh-huh.
aside from people just taking their own uh, locally sourced
Uh-huh.
uh, drugs.
Like we got SSRIs at home.
Uh, recently, some scientists have been calling that sort of standard model into question, though, at least in terms of serotonin.
Yeah, I
They've
saw
done
that.
some studies that said there wasn't any change of serotonin. So if it is brain chemicals, it's other chemicals,
Yeah.
or it could be that they're just wrong.
Uh-huh. I was
Uh,
like, man, that's what my problem is. God damn it.
so mind science is certainly not so it's not done by any
Right.
means, especially when there's businesses based on some particular theory.
That's true, because if money wasn't an object, we'd either learn nothing because people would have no incentive, or we'd have a lot more creativity in terms of scientific theory because people wouldn't be tied down to the funding.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Where it's like, we're not doing this because I have tenure, fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think about how hundreds of years ago, it may have actually been better for science because it's like, oh, you're just like these famous jobs. They're just like, I guess, funded by the king or or something. I don't know, or
You,
their family. You never hear about them like struggling to get a grant or doing like working for Starbucks or something. It's like,
you cut
it's
out
like,
for a second, but I was thinking you were probably
oh, I did.
talking about the antiquarian societies with all those rich people, or like
I guess that's a good
just
example.
I don't
Yeah, I
know.
was just saying, it's a lot of scientists, famous old scientists and philosophers. You never hear about them struggling for money and having to work
Right.
like at Starbucks or
Yeah.
something while they're trying to get a grant, you know.
Yeah.
But the bad side of that is that then like the church and the king or whatever would be like, nope, we don't like that theory.
Yeah.
Shh, it's a bit
Yeah. Like Galileo might have had a patron until he got in trouble.
right. And that's yeah, a lot of the astronomers seem to have that like, oh, you went too far. We're putting you into this house and locking you in there. So
Yeah, like Newton, you can stay in the attic, but don't come down here or we'll slap you.
I think wasn't Copernicus eventually like didn't he eventually piss people off? I don't know.
I don't know, probably. There was some guy, I think his name began with B, and he was like a monk, and he's like, well, there's planets out there and God is out in the universe. And they're like, oh no, you didn't. And then they tried to burn him at the stake or some goddamn
Yeah.
thing. I don't remember what that guy's name was. I know that there was some cartoon that I think Neil deGrasse Tyson was narrating that was talking about that guy.
I guess the modern day version is you get kicked out of academia, but at least you don't get burned, literally burned at the stake.
Yeah, they just try to cancel you.
You just get kind of shuffled off or
Yeah, they used to cancel people a
whatever.
little bit differently in the 1600s.
Yeah, big time.
Like Inquisition.
Nobody expects it.
Yeah. Nobody expects it. Okay. I suppose that's the end of the questions because I only have 3 of them. I ask people the same ones every time. This ended up being a lot different because you had sciencey stuff to talk about, which is nice. Do you have any stuff you want to talk about, or like upcoming projects or possible release dates for Bad Art Cops or anything?
Yeah, the short film Bad Art Cops, I'm still working on the special effects,
Uh-huh.
and it'll be done sometime this year.
Oh, that's good. I have a similar problem with my own work because I'm my own employee, so it takes me a long time to do everything.
Um, like it would have been nice if I had just outsourced some of this visual effects, but once I started with my own workflow, it would take even longer if I was to try and outsource it, and also I would have to pay, those people, and I don't want to spend any more money on on Bad Art Cops. So I made this bed, I have to sleep in it or whatever. I dug this grave. I have to die in it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like
but
it's wear this mask until you love it and die in it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the edit's been done for a long time. It's just finishing the compositing visual effects. And I'm hoping to film another short film that I specifically wrote to be totally different than Bad Art Cops in terms of being all filmed, almost totally, 99% filmed on camera.
Like practice.
Whereas Bad Art Cops was all 99% green screen. It was like my own little Marvel movie,
Oh, that's
which
why.
is a good experience, but I think that's better done with a bigger team
Mhm.
in money.
Yeah.
It's a good learning experience though. But yeah, this is like the opposite. So I'm like minimal, post effects. So once it's on film, then it's just editing, and editing for me is pretty quick.
Yeah. I've done that to myself too, where it's like I tend to learn everything like the longest, hardest way fucking possible the
Mm,
first time, and then I never want to do it again. And then I do something. Okay,
right.
useful to look
So,
at, like, wow.
mm, so that's the Payload
Cool.
film.
And
Hopefully I'll film that this year.
you're in.
And I had wanted to film a low budget feature horror this year, but um I haven't finished the script yet, and I have to get funding. So
Yeah, that's
it's
difficult.
gonna be, I'm not sure if I'll be able to actually get funding in this calendar year for that. We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, there's only 5 months, well, 4
Yeah,
months.
so it's a lot to fit
Yeah.
into 5 months.
Yeah. I've still,
But yeah, that's probably will be the next feature film I do. It's a sort of a cheesy horror film. It's a Christmas horror.
oh, well, that'll get you some butts in the seats because people will watch
Oh
them.
yeah, people love Christmas horror movies.
Yeah. I mean,
I've made a somewhat unique script. I'm still writing the script, so I think it's a little bit unique, and it's not quite as cheesy as some of the cheesiest indie films that are coming out lately. So I think um, now that I know how to do super low budget, I can sort of tweak the quality without increasing the budget.
right. And then camp is your friend in that zone anyway.
Yeah, people are forgiving in horror.
Yeah.
Which helps.
And plus, it like you have I don't know, tendency or skill, but you're able to make witty dialogue, which helps a lot. That's like if you can write stuff that's witty and funny enough that people are going to be quoting it for 20 years, then even if you don't make any money like at first, then you get like 5, 10 years, 20 years. Like,
Yeah, I guess the
oh,
trick is to not have too much. Like in my previous feature film, there's funny dialogue, but then there was too much boring exposition dialogue. And like even things that seem to flow on a script page, like
mhm.
dialogue is usually easy to read. But the thing is, then when you go to film it, it's so hard to make. Um, I guess that's the paradox of scripts, is you've got dialogue and it looks like reading dialogue generally flows well, but then you film it and you're like, oh man, it's going to be impossible to make this interesting if it's too long, and if
Mhm.
you don't have the ability to move the people around. They're stuck in a room or chairs or something.
Yeah.
And even worse, if they're talking about plot points.
That's
So
that's one
so
thing.
the lesson learned there is don't, if their characters are talking exposition, that's red flag, like just delete that shit. Just figure out some way of showing it visually.
Yeah, I like that
And
too.
if you're going for several pages of dialogue, even if it's the fun stuff, even that you've got to figure out a way, either you, the writer, or the director, in my case it's usually both, has to figure out a visual way to make that interesting. And that can be very challenging, even if it's fun dialogue. You'll see, I mean, and you'll notice that even like some of these big Marvel movies, they have speaking of creativity, there's a lack of creativity when they have like just basic dialogue scenes. And it's just like, yeah, we'll just have 5 superheroes just stand in the middle of this room and talk.
They've been doing that
And
on
we'll
SNL.
just do shot, reverse shot, nothing creative as these superheroes explain the plot. It's like, come on, you've got, you know, it's like move, at least have them, come up with some action, have them walking, move the camera,
I
you know,
feel like
angle the camera down or up. Like
they
you
did
have
that
all
in
this money and it's like,
Inception when they were like discussing what was going on with the maze, but they were walking in it and it was interesting.
right.
They do
Yeah,
that in SNL where they just have people standing around during a sketch, and I'm like, fucking move! Don't just stand there like it's a high school play and say your
right.
lines. Like, what the fuck?
Right. And that's what a lot of Marvel Avengers movies, like it's
Yeah. It's like
$300 million high school play.
the only superhero movies I've been watching is like Deadpool, and then I watched Suicide Squad because that was so I went on it.
Deadpool is actually a great example of a low budget movie that was very creative with the directing and the editing. I mean, it may not seem low budget because they had like $50 million, but to do a full,
Mm,
or maybe it was actually, I think they cut it, so it was going to be like 60, and then they cut it down to like at the last minute to 40, and they were like, oh crap. So
mm,
that's why but they turned it into, again, creativity. They use that constraint to make a joke. So there's they they saved the money by cutting out a big action scene at the end of the movie, and they made it into the joke where he forgets his guns.
uh-huh.
So that wasn't originally that he was going to have a big fight
Oh, that's
scene,
funny.
and so they turned it into a joke. And you notice how they kept reusing, like I feel like the SUV on that bridge uh scene was milked for so much footage, and
Uh-huh.
that I feel like 50% of the movie was just around that one scene, but the way they edited it, and with the jokes and stuff, it worked out.
Yeah, that's a solid movie. I really liked it.
Yeah, constraints can often, lead to creative solutions that
Yeah.
are really fun.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard about that at some movie at some time recently, but I don't remember which one. I've been watching a lot of movies on YouTube out of China and Korea, and this one film from Kazakhstan that was really good about Tamiris. And I like
Hmm.
watching it with subtitles because I like to hear the voices and the emotion of the original actors. So
Hmm.
but the like after a while you start recognizing like the same stories and there's like, maybe 10 different themes. But
Hmm.
it's sort of like the way people interact with each other is so much different than in American films. It's like if there's a chick, it's not just some slutty bimbo. She's actually like intrinsic to the plot and she also can kick ass. And like the way that they
Hmm.
film the action sequences is often really unique and interesting.
Hmm.
Like watched this Donnie Yen movie the other day. Wait, is that his name? I feel like it sounds wrong. Anyway, Iceman or whatever, it was a sequel, and they had him like traveling through time, running on a top of the train that was also going through the wormhole, and he was like hanging off the side of it on the bottom. It was
Nice.
awesome.
It's called Iceman.
I think so. There was two of them. He was like a emperor soldier from the 1600s, and he got frozen, and then they in the second movie they went back in time and tried to redo stuff. Pretty kick ass.
Hmm. I'll have to try and find that.
I also like those Monkey King movies. Those were all pretty good too. So anyway,
Yeah.
I guess that's it. You know,
All right.
else. So we'll say bye to the people.
Bye to the people.
See you around the regular places. Thanks for watching this video. This is just a real quick guide if you're looking for some tarot. First, we're just going to have a real quick view of my link tree so you know what to expect when you get there. There's a donation bar that will come up. You can click it down and that will help you see the rest of the list. We're just going to go to my WordPress website. And if you click the quick link to tarot readings page, this will take you to the tarot readings for sale page. This is a more visual depiction of the list of readings that you'll see in the description box underneath my YouTube videos. I'm just going to scroll down this real quick and you'll see the readings that are available and their current prices. You can see the same list in a PDF format. If you're on the front page here again, click Tarot Readings for Sale PDF or this download button right here, and this will take you to the PDF. You can see we have 4 pages here. It's the same list, same information, just in a downloadable format, so you can take it with you and read it later and think about it at lunch. And we'll just get back to the link tree here. Thanks a lot. Stay groovy and we'll see you later. Bye.